Have you ever wondered why a man can look at a woman with absolute composure on his face while a storm of desire, fear, memory, and instinct erupts just beneath his skin? Why he holds a gaze that seems calm, even indifferent, when inside him something ancient, something unspoken, is waking up? Most women think a man's deepest fantasy is physical, almost simplistic in its nature. But the truth is far more unsettling. At the core of the masculine psyche lies a hunger he himself barely understands. A longing not for the body alone, but for the moment when a woman's presence fractures his carefully built control. The moment her being cracks open the armor he spent years forging. This is where Jungian psychology begins its slow unraveling of the masculine myth. The fantasy he hides isn't the physical act. It isn't dominance, it isn't conquest, and it isn't possession. It is surrender, not yours, but his own. Yet he cannot admit this, not to you, not to anyone, and often not even to himself. Because in a man's world, surrender is a forbidden word. He was trained to win, to take, to stand strong. But secretly, beneath the stoic teachings of his father and the silent expectations of society, he wants one thing far more than your body. He wants the permission to collapse his identity for a moment and feel safe enough to be fully seen. There are men who have spent years performing strength, carrying the weight of a stoic facade while inside them lives a deep longing to be disarmed. You may have encountered this energy before. The way his breath changes when you allow your vulnerability to surface, the way his shoulders soften when your presence reaches a part of him he never shows the world. In that instant, he is no longer the warrior he pretends to be. He becomes the boy who grew too fast, the man who carried too much, the soul who has never been held without expectation. And this is the secret fantasy he guards behind silence. To be undone by a woman whose depth is greater than his defenses. Attraction, for the masculine unconscious, is rarely about beauty. It is about permission. The permission to exhale. The permission to feel again what he buried. The permission to stop being the fortress and finally be the earth. But he cannot tell you this because the very idea threatens his inner architecture. Men learned early that their worth lies in invulnerability. So they hide their fragility behind desire, their fear behind charm, their longing behind ambition. When he looks at you with intensity, when he pulls you closer as if something unseen is driving him, it isn't the hunger for your skin. It's the hunger for release from himself. And this is where the feminine energy holds a power he can neither control nor fully understand. You become the mirror he cannot escape. The place where the persona cracks and the shadow begins to rise. He feels drawn to you not because you fit his taste, but because you awaken the part of him he abandoned to survive. Jung called this the anima, the inner feminine that every man carries, the part of him that feels, dreams, intuits, and loves without needing to perform. He spends his life suppressing this inner woman, and then he meets you, the living representation of everything he lost. And suddenly, without warning, his unconscious recognizes himself in you. This recognition terrifies him, because now you are no longer just a woman. You are the key to a locked chamber he swore he would never open. The place where his unmet need for emotional safety sleeps. The place where his vulnerability hides like a wounded animal, waiting for the moment it can step into the light. Some women mistake this inner pull for lust alone, but if you look closely, you'll see something deeper. The way he studies your expression, not your lips. The way he responds to your emotional tone before your touch. The way his presence shifts when you soften into your own truth. His fantasy is not the moment you surrender your body. It's the moment he feels he can surrender his fear. This is why some men run from the very woman they desire most. She triggers the part of him that seeks genuine connection, a depth he is not prepared to hold. And so he distances himself, not because he doesn't want her, but because she exposes the grief of his unlived emotional life. He feels seen in ways that make him tremble. He feels naked without a single garment removed. And you might not realize how much power your authenticity carries. Not power to dominate him, but power to awaken him, to call forth the man beneath the man, the self beneath the persona, the soul beneath the armor. A woman who embodies her depth doesn't just attract a man, she resurrects him. As the layers of the masculine psyche are peeled back, something profound becomes visible. The man who seems composed on the surface is often carrying a lifetime of emotional exiles beneath it. He has hidden entire continents of himself in silence, not because he wants to deceive, but because he was never taught another way to exist. And when a woman steps into his life with enough presence, intuition, and emotional gravity, she doesn't just attract him. She confronts him with everything he never resolved. This confrontation is the silent battlefield where his deepest unspoken fantasy begins to emerge. The fantasy of being understood without being judged, exposed without being ridiculed, loved without having to earn it. Most men have never truly experienced that moment. They receive admiration for their qualities, respect for their accomplishments, attraction for their confidence, but they have rarely been met at the level where their soul actually lives. When you reach him there, he feels a mixture of awe and terror. Awe because he senses that you can see through him. Terror because he cannot control what this vision awakens. In Jungian terms, this is where the shadow begins to tremble. The shadow isn't evil. It is the part of him he had to exile to survive. He hid his softness, his longing for connection, his fear of inadequacy, his desire to let go. He buried these parts so deeply that even he forgot where he placed them. But feminine presence has a way of illuminating forgotten rooms of the psyche. You become the warm light that opens doors he never planned to confront. And here lies the dangerous beauty of the feminine influence. You awaken the man he secretly wishes he could be, but doesn't know how to embody. You awaken the part of him that wants emotional intimacy, not just physical closeness. This is the part he fantasizes about, not domination, not control, but the intimacy he has been trained to avoid, the intimacy that exposes the tremble in his breath, the vulnerability behind the bravado, the boy who wanted to be held instead of hardened. He will not speak of this longing. To admit it would violate every rule he inherited from a world that demanded stoicism from him. Men were raised on silence. They were fed a diet of be strong, don't cry, don't show weakness, don't depend on anyone. So he became an emotional fortress, convinced that his worth rested on the absence of vulnerability. But bodies remember what minds try to erase, and the masculine unconscious remembers the softness it abandoned. This is why some men change entirely around a certain type of woman. She doesn't have to be the most beautiful, the most charismatic, or the most confident. But her presence has a truth that disarms him. It's not her appearance, it's her essence. You may have noticed it, the way he listens more attentively when you speak, the protective shift in his posture when you're near, the unspoken tension in his eyes as if he's trying to decide whether to approach or retreat. What he is truly deciding is whether he can trust himself not to fall too deeply. Because his real fantasy, the one he'll never admit, is to be able to fall without being humiliated. To surrender without losing himself. To trust without consequence. To be claimed emotionally by a woman whose depth exceeds his fear. This is almost forbidden territory for him. Many men fear emotional intimacy more than physical exposure, because emotional intimacy requires nakedness of the soul. Physical vulnerability disappears when the act is finished, but emotional vulnerability lingers. It shapes him. It changes him. It leaves a mark. And that is precisely why he craves it and avoids it in equal measure. You become the paradox he cannot resolve, the danger he desires. When he feels emotionally safe with a woman, something rare happens. His ego loosens. His breath deepens. His guard lowers. For a moment, he feels the life he never lived. The one where he didn't have to carry the world alone. A woman who can meet him in that depth becomes unforgettable, not because she offered him pleasure, but because she offered him reflection. A reflection of everything he lost while trying to be a man. But this awakening comes with a cost. A woman who evokes his shadow, his anima, and his longing triggers a psychological process he cannot always endure. He might retreat. He might distance himself. He might become inconsistent or strangely silent. Not because he doesn't want her, but because she touches places in him that destabilize the identity he spent years constructing. You didn't break him. You revealed him. And that revelation is both the fantasy he cherishes and the fear he runs from. If you've ever felt a man pull away right when things grew deeper, you weren't imagining it. He was stepping into emotional territory his psyche wasn't prepared to navigate. Some women mistake this for rejection, but often this retreat is a sign that you reached a part of him no one else ever has. The part he guards with silence, the part that holds his most intimate longings, the part that dreams of surrendering to a connection he does not know how to handle. When a man retreats from the woman who awakens him, he is not escaping her. He is escaping himself. Something ancient rises inside him when he feels emotionally recognized. It is the part of him he kept buried beneath ambition, discipline, self-control, and the silent pressure to be unbreakable. This rising force disrupts the neat architecture of his masculine identity. And in this disruption, his secret fantasy begins to reveal its true shape. He longs for a connection that dissolves the boundaries he has built, yet he fears the collapse of the very fortress that kept him alive. Look deeply enough into the masculine unconscious, and you will find a paradox trembling beneath the surface. Jung understood this paradox well. Every man carries two competing instincts. The instinct to protect his independence and the instinct to surrender to the feminine principle that calls him home. One instinct builds walls, the other craves the freedom of laying them down. This inner conflict is why a man may pull you close with passionate intensity one moment, then distance himself the next. You awaken both instincts at once. You become the siren song of dissolution and the anchor of safety, the place where his ego fears drowning and his soul longs to rest. But make no mistake, his fantasy is not merely emotional sweetness, it is far more raw than that. The masculine psyche fantasizes about a woman who can reach him beyond his defenses, beyond his practiced stoicism, beyond the masks he presents to the world. He fantasizes about the moment when he no longer has to pretend he is steel, when he can fall apart in the presence of someone whose depth does not crumble at his vulnerability. To him, that moment is erotic in ways he does not understand. Not erotic because of the body, but because of the surrender. He has spent years equating desire with dominance, but the truth is that his deepest arousal comes from the moment he is emotionally disarmed. When a woman's presence makes him feel seen yet safe, undone yet held, strong yet welcome in his fragility, something within him ignites, something he does not know how to name. This is why some men stare at the woman they love with a kind of fear. They're not afraid of her. They're afraid of how much of themselves she makes visible. She becomes the mirror of his anima, the inner feminine that he has long suppressed. Through her, he reconnects with the intuitive, emotional, spiritual dimension that patriarchy forced him to abandon. He feels drawn to her not because she is flawless, but because she awakens his forgotten self. But the awakening of the anima always comes with turbulence. Jung wrote that when a man meets a woman who carries the energy of his inner feminine, she becomes both muse and mirror. She inspires him, heals him, terrifies him, and confronts him. He projects onto her all the unlived parts of his soul, and this projection forms the basis of an attraction that goes beyond reason. It is magnetic, irrational, consuming, And the woman feels it too. You can sense the unspoken pull, the gravitational energy that exists between you and him. You may not always understand why he breathes differently around you, or why his entire posture shifts when you soften your emotional armor. But you feel the shift, the way the space between you becomes charged with something thick, ancient, alive. He senses it as well, but he doesn't have your intuitive language to interpret it. So he expresses it through tension, mixed signals, intense eye contact, or sudden distance. To him, this connection is both salvation and threat. You are the doorway to the part of himself he left behind, and stepping through that doorway requires him to abandon control, something he has never done willingly. So he wrestles with himself in silence. On the outside, he seems calm. Inside, he's fighting an invisible war. You may think he wants only your physical presence, but the truth is far deeper. He wants the moment when your essence reaches the place where he hides his fear of not being enough. That is the intimacy he fantasizes about, an intimacy where he can exist without performing strength. But he will never admit this, not even in whispers, because men are taught that their value lies in the armor, not the vulnerability it protects. And yet, despite all this fear, he cannot stay away from you. He gravitates toward your emotional truth because it calls forth the man he could be if he stopped running. Your authenticity forces him to confront his emotional underdevelopment. Your depth challenges his superficial coping mechanisms. Your softness destabilizes his emotional numbness. And your presence awakens the desire for a connection that honors his soul rather than his ego. He doesn't know how to articulate any of this. He may not even understand it consciously, but he feels it. In the tightening of his chest, the heat behind his eyes, the instinct to protect you, the longing to be near you even when words fail. You become the antidote to a loneliness he never admitted he carried. You become the place where he imagines, even for a fleeting moment, that he could be fully alive. There is a moment, subtle, nearly invisible, when a man realizes that the connection he feels with a woman is no longer something he can categorize, control, or neatly place within the limits of his comfort. This moment happens in the quiet spaces, in the way he exhales when you enter a room, in the way his voice softens involuntarily when he speaks to you, in the way his eyes linger just a little too long. It is not lust that grips him then. Lust is loud, impulsive, easily explained. What he feels with you defies explanation, and that is precisely why it consumes him. For the masculine psyche, this kind of connection marks the collision between two internal worlds: the outer man who performs competence and certainty, and the inner man who longs for the emotional nourishment he has denied himself. When he senses that you can perceive both parts of him, something deep inside him shifts. His secret fantasy begins to take a new shape. He imagines being with a woman who doesn't just accept his vulnerability, but actually awakens it. A woman who doesn't just understand his strength, but sees beyond it. A woman whose presence makes him feel more human, not less masculine. Yet this fantasy, this forbidden longing, threatens the very identity he built. So he protects himself by creating distance, even as he desires closeness. You might notice it, the pattern of intense pull followed by sudden silence. The moments when he seems open, almost transparent, followed by abrupt withdrawal. This inconsistency is not manipulation. It is fear. He fears the dissolution of the persona he crafted, fears the emotional exposure that connection with you demands, fears the possibility that once he lets you in, he may never be able to close the door again. Jung called this internal tension the confrontation with the self, a psychological initiation that is often triggered through intimate relationships. Through your presence, he begins to encounter parts of himself he has ignored. The anima stirs, the shadow approaches, the persona weakens. A deep woman activates the entire internal hierarchy of a man's psyche, and this activation demands transformation. Few men are prepared for it. This is why the masculine retreats. He fears the cost of becoming who he could be. But here is the part he will never confess. Despite his fear, he is drawn to the woman who evokes this inner transformation. Not because she makes it easy, but because she makes it real. He senses that she is not looking for a half-developed man who hides behind charm or surface-level masculinity. She calls forth the man who knows how to feel, the man who knows how to lead from truth, not from ego, the man who knows that strength is not the absence of vulnerability, but the integration of it. In her presence, his unconscious whispers a truth he cannot ignore, that the deepest intimacy isn't sexual surrender. It is emotional revelation. It is the moment he lays down his weapons, the moment he lets her see what he protects beneath his silence, the moment he stops trying to impress and starts trying to be understood. This moment is the heart of his secret fantasy, to meet a woman who can hold the part of him he never shows. And yet, he resists, because such a woman does not allow him to hide. She doesn't let him get away with emotional evasion or false confidence. She awakens the desire to be better, to evolve, to confront the wounds he buried beneath manhood. Most men were never taught how to do this work. They were taught how to provide, how to endure, how to act. But the emotional realm, they were left to figure it out alone. So when he meets you, the woman whose presence acts as a psychological mirror, he finds himself exposed in ways that feel both exhilarating and terrifying. Your voice, your intuition, your emotional intelligence, they stir the parts of him that ache for connection. And, at the same time, they threaten the very structure he built to avoid that ache. You may not realize the magnitude of your influence. A woman connected to her emotional truth disrupts a man's unconscious defenses simply by being herself. You do not need to chase him, demand him, or decode him. Your depth alone destabilizes his numbness. Your self-awareness reveals his emotional uncertainty. Your authenticity forces him to confront his own avoidance. This is why he fantasizes about surrendering to you. Not because he wants to be dominated, but because he wants to stop performing. He wants to be held in a space where he doesn't have to be invincible. A space where he can lay down the emotional exhaustion he carries like armor. A space where he can exhale without shame. In the presence of such a woman, a man begins to feel the pull toward a deeper kind of intimacy. One that requires him to dissolve what is false and reveal what is true. And even if he has no vocabulary for it, his soul recognizes it instantly. There is an unmistakable point in a man's inner journey where resistance begins to collapse under the weight of truth. Not the truth you speak to him, but the truth he begins to see within himself through you. For a woman who stands rooted in her own emotional gravity becomes less of a companion and more of a catalyst. She represents the threshold between who he pretends to be and who he is capable of becoming. And this transition, this unveiling, is the very essence of his most secret fantasy. To be transformed in the presence of a woman whose depth commands his honesty. You may have felt this in the way his posture changes around you, the way the strain in his voice softens, even when he tries to appear composed, the way he seems torn between leaning into the connection and stepping back to regain equilibrium. What he doesn't understand is that the tension he feels is not about you. It is about the dismantling of the persona he has used to navigate the world. You do not threaten him. His own awakening does. And as this awakening deepens, something extraordinary begins to take form inside him. He starts to realize that what he always thought he wanted, admiration, certainty, sexual conquest, pales in comparison to what his unconscious actually craves. A place where he can unclench the emotional fist he has kept closed for years. A place where he can be felt rather than evaluated. A place where his strength is not defined by performance, but by the courage to reveal the part of him that never healed. This is the secret fantasy he will never admit. The fantasy of being emotionally chosen, not pursued, not seduced, chosen. Chosen by a woman whose presence is so grounded, so intuitive, so quietly powerful that his soul feels recognized before a single word is spoken. He dreams of a connection where he doesn't have to negotiate his worth, where he doesn't have to prove that he is enough, where his flaws are not sins but gateways to deeper understanding. But this fantasy demands sacrifice, the letting go of ego-driven masculinity, the release of old emotional armor, the acceptance of vulnerability as strength. So he hesitates. And in that hesitation, he often sabotages the very connection he longs for. He retreats. He closes off. He convinces himself that he needs more time, more certainty, more control. Yet, beneath the excuses lies a single truth. The depth he desires is the same depth he fears. Still, something in him continues to move toward you. The masculine psyche, no matter how guarded, is drawn to authenticity like a compass to true north. He may not speak it, but he feels it. Your emotional clarity pulls him out of the numbness that protected him. Your intuitive presence exposes the hollowness of superficial desire. Your strength challenges the fragility he hides. And your softness calls forth the tenderness he lost years ago. This is why he remembers you even when he tries to forget. Why he feels restless when he distanced himself. Why he feels something tighten in his chest when he imagines you in the arms of someone with the courage to meet your depth. Because somewhere within him, a voice whispers that you are not simply a woman. You are the initiation he has been avoiding. In the end, the greatest transformation happens not when he conquers you, but when he allows you to reach him. To reach the deep chambers of his emotional life where he stores regret, longing, childhood wounds, and the versions of himself he abandoned. And a woman who meets him there holds a power he cannot rationalize, the power to invite him into wholeness. But here is the paradox that liberates you. A man cannot meet your depth if he is still negotiating with his shadow. You cannot force him to awaken, to open, to reveal, or to choose. You can only stand in the wholeness of your feminine truth, the very truth that calls forth the strongest version of a man or exposes his emotional unreadiness. And this is where your own transformation begins. When you understand that his secret fantasy is not your responsibility. His emotional awakening is not your burden. His fear is not your obstacle. His confusion is not your path. You are the mirror, not the healer. You are the invitation, not the guarantee. You are the depth, not the sacrifice. The woman who knows this no longer shrinks, chases, or waits. She walks with a steady heart, knowing that the man capable of meeting her will feel her depth not as a threat, but as a homecoming. And when that man arrives, awakened, present, emotionally alive, he will not fear surrender. He will offer it. Because the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.